Book of Heaven, Volume 11, Part 8. September 20th, 1913. Everything that happens around and inside the soul is nothing other than the continuous crafting of Jesus, so that His will may be fulfilled and carried out in her. I was thinking about my present state, how little or nothing I suffer. And Jesus immediately, "My daughter, everything that happens around and inside the soul, bitternesses, pleasures, contrasts, deaths, privations, contentments, and other things, is nothing other than my continuous crafting, so that my will may be fulfilled and carried out in her. When I obtain this, all is done, and therefore everything gives the soul peace. It seems that even suffering wants to stay away from her, in seeing that the divine volition is greater than it is, and that it holds in her the place of everything, surpassing everything. It seems that all pay reverence to her, and I myself, when the soul reaches this point of using everything in order to let me accomplish the crafting of my will, once this is done, I prepare her for heaven. September 21st, 1913. All the things that the soul does in the divine will and together with Jesus acquire His same qualities, the same life, and the same value. This morning my always lovable Jesus made Himself seen with indescribable sweetness and affability, as if He wanted to tell me something very dear to Him and of great surprise for me. So, embracing me completely and pressing me to His heart, He told me, "My beloved daughter, all the things that the soul does in my will and together with me, prayers, actions, steps, and so forth, acquire my same qualities, the same life, and the same value. See, all the things I did upon earth, prayers, sufferings, works, are all in act, and shall remain in eternity for the good of whomever wants them. My operating differs from the operating of creatures. Containing the creative power within myself, I speak and I create. Just as one day I spoke and I created the sun, and the sun is always full of light and heat, and it always gives light and heat as if it were in the act of receiving continuous creation from me, without ever decreasing. Such was my operating upon earth. Since I contain the creative power within myself, the prayers, the steps, the works I did, and the blood I shed are in continuous act of praying, of operating, of walking, and so forth, just as the sun is in continuous act of giving light. So my prayers continue. My steps are always in the act of running after souls, and so with the rest. Otherwise, what great difference would exist between my operating and that of my saints? Now, my daughter, listen to a beautiful, beautiful thing, not yet understood by creatures. All the things that the soul does together with me and in my will, just as are my things, so are hers too. The connection with my will and her operating together with me participate in my same creative power. I remained ecstatic and with a joy that I could not contain, and I said, How can all this be possible, O Jesus? And he, whoever does not understand this, can say that he does not know me. And he disappeared. But I cannot say it well, and I don't know how to explain myself better. Who can tell all that he made me understand? Rather, it seems to me that I have spoken nonsense. September 25th, 1913. The divine will is the center of the soul. The sacraments produce their fruits and effects according to how souls are submitted to the divine will and to their connection with it. I told the confessor that Jesus had said to me that the will of God is the center of the soul, that this center is in the depth of the soul, and that spreading its rays like sun, it gives light to the mind, sanctity to the actions, strength to the steps, life to the heart, power to the word, and to everything. And not only this, but also that while this center, the will of God, is inside of us, so that we may never escape from it, and so as to remain at our continuous disposal, never leaving us alone or separated even for 1 minute. At the same time, it is also in front of us, on our right, on our left, behind, and everywhere. And it shall be our center also in heaven. The confessor was saying instead that the Most Holy Sacrament is our center. Now, on coming, Blessed Jesus told me, "My daughter, I had to make it in such a way that sanctity might be easy and accessible to all, unless they did not want it, in all conditions, in all circumstances, and in every place. It is true that the Most Holy Sacrament is center, but who instituted it? Who subdued my humanity to enclose itself within the small circle of a host? Wasn't that my will? Therefore my will shall always have primacy over everything. Besides, if everything is in the Eucharist, the priests who call me from heaven into their hands, and who are in contact with my sacramental flesh more than anyone, should be the holiest and the most good. But instead, many of them are the worst. Poor me, how they treat me in the Most Holy Sacrament. And the many devout souls who receive me, perhaps every day, should be as many saints, if the center of the Eucharist were sufficient. But instead, and it is something to be cried over, they remain always at the same point, vain, irascible, punctilious, and so forth. Poor center of the Most Holy Sacrament, how dishonored it remains! On the other hand, there may be a mother who does my will, and who, because of her situation, not because she does not want to, cannot receive me every day. And one sees that she is patient, charitable, and carries the fragrance of my Eucharistic virtues within herself. Ah, is it perhaps the sacrament, or rather, my will, to which she is submitted, that keeps her subdued, and makes up for the Most Holy Sacrament? Even more, I tell you, that the sacraments themselves produce fruits according to how souls are submitted to my will. They produce effects according to the connection that souls have with my volition. And if there is no connection with my will, they may receive communion, but shall remain on an empty stomach. They may go to confession, but shall remain always dirty. They may come before my sacramental presence, but if our wills do not meet, I shall be as though dead for them, because my will alone produces all goods, and gives life to the very sacraments in the soul who lets herself be subdued by it. And those who do not understand this, it means that they are babies in religion. October 2nd, 1913, when the human will unites to the divine will, the life of Jesus is formed in the soul. The soul who does the will of God can say that her life is ended. Continuing in my usual state, Blessed Jesus made himself seen inside of me, but so identified with me that I could see his eyes within mine, his mouth within mine, and so with the rest. While I saw him like this, he said to me, "My daughter, look at how I identify myself with the soul who does my will, making myself one with her. I become her very life, because my will is inside and outside of that soul. It can be said that my will is like the air that she breathes, that gives life to everything, like light that makes one see and understand everything, like heat that warms, fecundates, and makes one grow, like heart that palpitates, like hands that work, like feet that walk. And when the human will unites to my volition, my life is formed in the soul." Then, having received communion, I was saying to Jesus, "I love you." And he told me, "My daughter, do you really want to love me? Say, 'Jesus, I love you with your will.' And since my will fills heaven and earth, your love shall surround me everywhere, and your 'I love you' shall resound up there in the heavens, and down to the bottom of the abysses. In the same way, if you want to say, 'I adore you, I bless you, I praise you,' you shall say it united with my will, and shall fill heaven and earth with adorations, with blessings, with praises, with thanksgivings. In my will things are simple, easy, and immense. My will is everything, so much so that my very attributes, what are they? A simple act of my will. So if justice, goodness, wisdom, fortitude follow their course, my will precedes them, accompanies them, and places them in the attitude of operating. In sum, they do not move 1 point from my volition. Therefore, whoever takes my will takes everything. Even more, she can say that her life is ended. Ended the weaknesses, the temptations, the passions, the miseries, because all things lose their rights in the one who does my will, for my will has primacy over everything and right to everything. November 18th, 1913. When the human will and the divine will are opposed, one forms the cross of the other. The cross can do as much good insofar as it is connected with the will of God. I was thinking about my poor state, and how even the cross has been banished from me. And in my interior, Jesus told me, "My daughter, when two wills are opposed to each other, one forms the cross of the other. So it is between me and the creatures. When their wills are opposed to mine, I form their cross, and they form mine. I am the long beam of the cross, while they are the short one, and crossing each other, they form the cross. Now, when the will of the soul unites with mine, the beams are no longer crossed, but united, and therefore the cross is no longer a cross. Have you understood? And besides, I sanctified the cross. It was not the cross that sanctified me. It is not the cross that sanctifies. It is the resignation to my will that sanctifies the cross. Therefore even the cross can do as much good in so far as it is connected with my will. Not only this, the cross sanctifies and crucifies part of the person, while my will does not spare anything. It sanctifies everything, and crucifies thoughts, desires, will, affections, heart, everything. And since my will is light, it shows to the soul the necessity of this sanctification and complete crucifixion, in such a way that she herself incites me to accomplish the crafting of my will upon her. Therefore, the cross and the other virtues are content as long as they get something. And if they can pierce the creature with 3 nails, they boast of their triumph. On the other hand, my will, that does not know how to do incomplete works, is not content with just 3 nails, but with as many nails for as many acts of my will that I dispose for the creature. November 27th, 1913. The divine will is the highest point that can exist, both in heaven and on earth. My always lovable Jesus continues to speak about his most holy will. My daughter, as many complete acts of my will as the creature performs, so many parts of me does she take into herself. And the more she takes of my will, the more light she acquires, forming the sun within herself. And since this sun is formed by the light that she takes from my will, the rays of this sun are linked to the rays of my divine sun. So each one is reflected into the other. Each one flashes through the other, and they dart through each other. And as they do this, the sun that my will has formed in the soul becomes larger and larger. And I, Jesus, here we are again, in your will. It seems you have nothing else to say. And Jesus, my will is the highest point that can exist, both in heaven and on earth. And when the soul has reached it, she has subdued everything and has done everything. There is nothing left for her to do but to dwell over these heights, enjoy them, and understand this will of mine more and more. That is not yet understood well, either in heaven or on earth. There is much time for you to be spent in it, because you have understood very little, and much remains for you to understand. My will is so great that whoever does it can call himself a god of the earth. And just as my will forms the beatitude of heaven, these gods who do my will form the beatitude of the earth and of those who are near them. There is no good that exists on earth that is not to be attributed to these gods of my will. Whether as direct or as indirect cause, everything is due to them. Just as there is no happiness in heaven that does not come from me, so there is no good on earth that does not come from them. March 8, 1914. As the soul lives and dies in the divine will, there is no good that she does not carry with herself. The value of one single instant in the divine will. all that the soul who lives in the divine will experiences does not belong to her, but to Jesus within her. The one who lives in the divine will can by no means go to purgatory. Continuing in my usual state, my always lovable Jesus has not ceased to speak to me so very often about his most holy will. I shall say the little I remember. As I was not feeling well, on coming, blessed Jesus told me, "My daughter, the soul who lives in my will can say of everything I do, 'It is mine.' This because the will of the soul is so identified with mine that whatever my will does, she does as well. So, as she lives and dies in my volition, there is no good that she does not carry with herself, because there is no good that my will does not contain. My will is the life of all the good that creatures do. Therefore, as the soul dies in my will, she carries with her the masses that are celebrated, and the prayers, and the good works that are done, because they are all of my will. And this is still very little compared to the operating of my will itself that the soul carries with her as her own. One instant of the operating of my will is enough to surpass all the works of all creatures, past, present, and future. So, as the soul dies in my will, there is no beauty that matches her, nor heights, riches, sanctity, wisdom, or love. Nothing can equal her. As the soul who dies in my will enters into the heavenly fatherland, not only shall the heaven's gates open, but the entire heaven shall bow to welcome her into the celestial dwelling, to honor the working of my will. What should I tell you, then, of the feast and the surprise of all the blessed in seeing this soul completely marked by the working of the divine will? In seeing in this soul who has done everything in my will, that everything she has done during her life, each saying, each thought, word, work, action of hers, are many sons that adorn her, each one different from the other in light and in beauty. And in seeing in this soul many divine rivulets that shall inundate all the blessed, and flow also upon earth for the good of pilgrim souls, since heaven cannot contain them. Ah, my daughter, my will is the portent of portents. It is the secret of finding light, sanctity, and riches. It is the secret to all goods. But it is not known, and therefore not appreciated nor loved. You, at least, appreciate it, love it, and make it known to those whom you see disposed. Another day, as I was suffering, I felt like I was unable to do anything, so I felt oppressed. And Jesus, clasping the whole of me, told me, "My daughter, do not worry yourself. Try only to be abandoned in my will, and I shall do everything for you, because one single instant in my will is more than all the good you could possibly do in your entire life." I also remember that another day he told me, "My daughter, the one who truly does my will, in everything that occurs within her, both in the soul and in the body, in whatever she feels and suffers, can say, 'Jesus is suffering, Jesus is oppressed.' In fact, Everything that creatures do to me reaches me, even in the soul in whom I dwell, who does my will. So, if the coldness of creatures reaches me, my will feels it. And since my will is life of that soul, it happens as a consequence that the soul feels it too. So instead of troubling herself over this coldness as if it were her own, she must remain around me to console me and repair for the coldness that creatures send to me. In the same way, if she feels distractions, oppressions, and other things, she must remain around me to relieve me and repair, as if those were not her things but mine. Therefore, the soul who lives of my will shall feel many different pains, according to the offenses that creatures give me, but in a sudden way, and almost in one start. On the other hand, she shall also feel indescribable joys and contentments. And if in the first she must occupy herself with consoling me and repairing, in the joys and contentments she must delight. Only then does my will find my own interest. Otherwise it would remain saddened and unable to carry out what my volition contains. Another day he told me, "My daughter, the one who does my will can by no means go to purgatory, because my will purges the soul of everything." After keeping her so jealously during her life, in the custody of my volition, how could I allow the fire of purgatory to touch her? At the most, she may lack some clothing, but my will, before revealing the divinity to her, shall clothe her with all that she may lack. And then I reveal myself. March 14th, 1914. How hard it is for Jesus not to content the one who does his will and takes the whole of him. Today I was fusing all of myself in Jesus, but so much as to feel the whole of Jesus alive and real within me. While I was feeling him, he said to me, but in such a tender and touching way that I felt my poor heart crack, "My daughter, it is too hard for me not to content the one who does my will. As you see, I have no more hands, nor feet, nor heart, nor eyes, nor mouth. I have nothing left. In my will that you have taken, you took possession of everything, and I have nothing left. This is why, in spite of the many grave evils that inundate the earth, the deserved chastisements are not pouring upon it, because it is hard for me not to content you. Besides, how can I do that if I have no hands, and you do not give them to me? If they become absolutely necessary to me, I shall be forced to steal them from you, or to convince you so that you yourself would give them to me. How hard it is for me, how hard it is for me to displease the one who does my will. I would displease myself. I remained surprised at this speaking of Jesus. Not only this, but I could really see that I had the hands, the feet, and the eyes of Jesus. And I said to him, "Jesus, let me come." And he, "Give me a little more of life in you, and then you shall come." You have reached the end of the Book of Heaven, Volume 11, Part 8. Fiat.